The Ottoman Empire. For over 6 centuries, this extraordinary power dominated 3 continents, reshaping the course of world history. From its humble beginnings as a small Turkish principality to becoming one of the most formidable empires the world has ever known, the Ottoman story is one of conquest, culture, innovation, and eventual decline. This is the complete history of the Ottoman Empire. Our story begins in the late 13th century, in the turbulent landscape of Anatolia. The region was a patchwork of small Turkish principalities, or beyliks, that had emerged following the decline of the Seljuk Sultanate of Rome. Among these competing powers was a modest territory led by a chieftain named Osman, son of Ertugrul. In 1299, Osman declared independence from his Seljuk overlords, establishing what would become known as the Ottoman Principality. The name Ottoman itself derives from Osman, the founder whose vision would set in motion centuries of imperial expansion. Osman was a skilled warrior and tactician. He understood that survival in this competitive environment required both military strength and diplomatic cunning. He forged alliances with neighboring Turkish tribes while simultaneously conducting raids against the weakening Byzantine territories. His strategy was brilliant in its simplicity: expand toward Byzantine lands where opposition was weakest, absorbing Christian peasants and warriors into his growing domain. By the time of his death in 1323 or 1324, Osman had transformed his small principality into a formidable regional power. Osman's son, Orhan, continued his father's legacy with remarkable success. Orhan captured the important Byzantine city of Bursa in 1326, making it the first Ottoman capital. This was a pivotal moment. Bursa was not just a military conquest. It was a wealthy, cultured city that gave the Ottomans legitimacy and resources. Orhan established the foundations of Ottoman government, creating administrative structures that would endure for centuries. He organized a standing army, issued the first Ottoman coins, and established religious institutions that reinforced his authority. Under Orhan's rule, the Ottomans achieved something remarkable. They crossed into Europe. In 1352, taking advantage of a devastating earthquake that damaged Byzantine fortifications, Ottoman forces crossed the Dardanelles and established a foothold on European soil at Gallipoli. This was a turning point in world history. The Ottomans were no longer merely an Anatolian power. They had become a bridge between continents, a force that would reshape the balance between East and West. Murad I, who ruled from 1362 to 1389, accelerated the Ottoman advance into the Balkans. He captured Adrianople, renaming it Edirne and making it the new Ottoman capital, closer to the European frontiers. Murad's armies pushed deep into Serbia, Bulgaria, and Macedonia. Christian kingdoms fell one by one. But Murad was not merely a conqueror. He was an empire builder. He established the Devshirme system, a controversial but effective practice of recruiting Christian boys, converting them to Islam, and training them as elite soldiers and administrators. These recruits would become the famous Janissaries, the Sultan's personal infantry corps. The Battle of Kosovo in 1389 became legendary in both Ottoman and Serbian history. Murad led his forces against a coalition of Serbian princes. The battle was fierce and bloody. Although Murad was assassinated during or shortly after the battle, the Ottomans emerged victorious. Kosovo opened the door to further Ottoman expansion into Europe and became a defining moment in Balkan history, one that would resonate for centuries. Murad's son, Bayezid I, known as Yildirim or the Thunderbolt for his lightning-fast military campaigns, continued the expansion with ferocious energy. He tightened the Ottoman grip on Anatolia and expanded Ottoman control in the Balkans. By the end of the 14th century, the Ottomans had virtually encircled Constantinople, the capital of the Byzantine Empire. The great city, once the center of Eastern Christendom, was now an isolated enclave surrounded by Ottoman territory. However, disaster struck from an unexpected direction. In 1402, the Ottomans faced a new threat from the east. Timur, also known as Tamerlane, the fearsome Central Asian conqueror. At the Battle of Ankara, Timur's forces crushed the Ottoman army. Bayezid himself was captured, a humiliating blow that sent shockwaves through the empire. The once mighty Ottoman state seemed on the verge of collapse. What followed was a period known as the Ottoman Interregnum, a brutal civil war among Bayezid's sons that lasted from 1402 to 1413. The empire fractured as rival princes fought for the throne. Anatolian territories that had been conquered broke away. It appeared that the Ottoman experiment might end after barely a century. But the empire proved resilient. Mehmed I emerged victorious from the civil war, reunifying Ottoman territories and restoring central authority. His son, Murad II, continued the work of rebuilding, recapturing lost territories, and reasserting Ottoman power in both Anatolia and the Balkans. Then came Mehmed II, known to history as Mehmed the Conqueror. When he ascended the throne in 1451 at the age of 19, many underestimated him. They would soon learn their mistake. Mehmed was brilliant, ambitious, and utterly determined to achieve what generations of Muslim rulers had failed to accomplish: the conquest of Constantinople. Constantinople was one of the most heavily fortified cities in the world. Its massive Theodosian walls had repelled countless sieges over more than 1,000 years. The city was protected by the sea on 3 sides, with a great chain blocking entry to the Golden Horn Harbor. Previous Ottoman sieges had failed, but Mehmed prepared meticulously. He built a fortress on the European side of the Bosphorus, controlling access to the Black Sea. He assembled a massive army of perhaps 80,000 men. Most importantly, he commissioned the casting of enormous cannons, including the legendary Basilica cannon that could fire stone balls weighing over 600 kilograms. The siege began in April 1453. For nearly 2 months, Ottoman cannons pounded Constantinople's walls day and night. The outnumbered Byzantine defenders, led by Emperor Constantine XI, fought with desperate courage. Mehmed attempted multiple assaults, all repelled with heavy casualties. Then, in a stroke of genius, the Ottomans transported dozens of ships overland, bypassing the chain that blocked the Golden Horn and launching them into the harbor behind Byzantine defenses. On May 29, 1453, Mehmed ordered a final, all-out assault. Ottoman forces attacked from multiple directions simultaneously. After hours of brutal fighting, Ottoman soldiers breached the walls. Emperor Constantine died fighting in the streets. By afternoon, the city had fallen. After 11 centuries, the Byzantine Empire was no more. Mehmed entered Constantinople in triumph. He converted the magnificent Hagia Sophia Cathedral into a mosque and declared the city the new capital of the Ottoman Empire. Constantinople became Istanbul, though this name would not become official for centuries. The conquest sent shockwaves throughout Christian Europe and the Islamic world. The Ottomans had achieved the impossible. They were now undeniably a world power. Mehmed did not stop with Constantinople. He conquered Serbia, Bosnia, Albania, and parts of Greece. He fought wars against Venice, Hungary, and Persia. He transformed Istanbul into a cosmopolitan imperial capital, encouraging Greeks, Armenians, Jews, and Muslims to settle there. When Mehmed died in 1481, He left an empire that stretched from the Danube to the Euphrates, from the Adriatic to the Black Sea. The 16th century would see the Ottoman Empire reach its absolute zenith under a succession of powerful sultans. Selim I, who ruled from 1512 to 1520, was known as Selim the Grim for his ruthless efficiency. In just 8 years, he doubled the size of the empire. His primary targets were not Christian Europe, but his Muslim rivals. In 1514, he defeated the Safavid Empire of Persia at the Battle of Calderon, securing Ottoman control of eastern Anatolia. Then he turned south. In a lightning campaign between 1516 and 1517, Selim conquered the Mamluk Sultanate, which controlled Egypt, Syria, and the Hijaz region of Arabia. In one stroke, the Ottomans gained control of Islam's holiest cities, Mecca and Medina. The Ottoman Sultan now bore the prestigious title of custodian of the two holy mosques, immensely boosting his legitimacy throughout the Islamic world. Selim's son, Suleiman, would become the most famous Ottoman Sultan in history. In the West, he is known as Suleiman the Magnificent. In the Ottoman world, he was called Suleiman the Lawgiver for his comprehensive legal reforms. Suleiman ruled for 46 years, from 1520 to 1566, and during his reign, the Ottoman Empire reached its greatest territorial extent and cultural flowering. Suleiman was a warrior, a patron of the arts, a poet, and a lawmaker. His military campaigns were spectacular. He conquered Belgrade in 1521 and Rhodes in 1522, eliminating key Christian strongholds. In 1526, at the Battle of Mohacs, Ottoman forces utterly destroyed the Hungarian army. Hungary fell under Ottoman control. Suleiman pushed into the heart of Europe, besieging Vienna in 1529. Although the siege failed, it terrified Christian Europe. The Ottoman threat seemed unstoppable. In the east, Suleiman fought multiple campaigns against Safavid Persia, capturing Baghdad and securing control of Mesopotamia. In the Mediterranean, the Ottoman navy under the brilliant Admiral Barbarossa dominated the seas. Ottoman fleets raided the coasts of Italy and Spain. The Mediterranean had become an Ottoman lake. But Suleiman was more than a conqueror. He reformed Ottoman law, creating a coherent legal system that balanced Islamic Sharia with customary law and imperial decrees. He was a great builder. Under his patronage, the architect Mimar Sinan created masterpieces like the Suleiman Mosque in Istanbul, structures that remain among the world's most beautiful buildings. Suleiman's court was a center of culture and learning. Poets, scholars, artists, and craftsmen flourished under his patronage. Yet even this golden age had shadows. Suleiman's reign was marred by family tragedy. His beloved wife, Hurrem Sultan, known in the West as Roxolana, influenced palace politics extensively. Tragically, Suleiman was convinced by court intrigues to execute his own son, Prince Mustafa, who was widely seen as the most capable heir. This decision would have long-term consequences for the empire's governance. After Suleiman's death in 1566, the Ottoman Empire remained powerful, but the seeds of future problems had been planted. His successor, Selim II, was the first sultan in generations who was not primarily a warrior. This began a pattern. Subsequent sultans increasingly left governance to their grand viziers and focused on palace life. The practice of princes receiving provincial governorships, which had trained them for rule, was abandoned. Instead, princes were confined to the palace, emerging only when called to the throne, often without practical experience in governance or military affairs. Despite these changes, the empire remained formidable. The conquest of Cyprus in 1571 extended Ottoman power, though the subsequent naval defeat at Lepanto showed that Ottoman dominance at sea could be challenged. Under capable grand viziers, particularly from the Copperleaf family in the 17th century, the empire continued to expand. Crete was conquered in a long war with Venice. In 1683, the Ottomans launched their second siege of Vienna, seeking to finally break into Central Europe. The Siege of Vienna in 1683 marked a crucial turning point. The Ottoman army, led by Grand Vizier Kara Mustafa Pasha, surrounded the city. For 2 months, Vienna held out desperately. Then, in September, a relief army arrived, led by the Polish King Jan Sobieski. The Battle of Vienna was decisive. The relief force crushed the Ottoman army, which retreated in disorder. It was a catastrophic defeat. The failure at Vienna began what historians call the Long War and the subsequent era of Ottoman decline. For the first time, the Ottomans faced sustained, coordinated pressure from multiple European powers. The Holy League, comprising Austria, Poland, Venice, and Russia, pushed the Ottomans back. In 1699, the Treaty of Karlowitz forced the Ottomans to cede Hungary, Transylvania, and parts of Croatia to Austria. Ottoman invincibility was shattered. The 18th century brought further challenges. Russia emerged as a major threat, seeking to expand southward at Ottoman expense and to position itself as the protector of Orthodox Christians under Ottoman rule. A series of Russo-Turkish wars resulted in Ottoman territorial losses. The Treaty of Küçük-Kaynarca in 1774 gave Russia significant rights in Ottoman territory and control of the northern Black Sea coast. Internally, the empire faced mounting problems. The military, once the empire's greatest strength, had become outdated. The Janissaries, who had once been an elite force, had become a conservative, privileged class resistant to reform. The economy struggled to compete with increasingly industrialized European powers. Provincial governors gained autonomy, sometimes becoming virtually independent. Corruption was endemic. Yet some Ottoman leaders recognized these problems and attempted reforms. Sultan Selim III, who ruled from 1789 to 1807, tried to modernize the military along European lines, creating a new army called the Nizam-i Sedid. He faced fierce resistance from the Janissaries and conservative religious scholars. Eventually, he was deposed and killed in a Janissary revolt. His successor, Mahmud II, was more successful, though at great cost. In 1826, when the Janissaries revolted again, Mahmud was prepared. He had secured the support of religious authorities and other military units. Ottoman artillery bombarded the Janissary barracks. Thousands were killed. The Janissary Corps was abolished, ending an institution that had existed for nearly 5 centuries. This brutal act cleared the way for more comprehensive reforms. The 19th century became an era of intensive modernization efforts known as the Tanzimat, or reorganization. Beginning in 1839, a series of reforms attempted to modernize Ottoman government, law, education, and society. New secular schools were established alongside traditional religious education. Legal reforms granted equal citizenship to non-Muslims, attempting to reduce nationalist tensions. A modern bureaucracy was created. Infrastructure projects like railways and telegraph lines were undertaken. These reforms were partially successful, but also created new tensions. They required enormous funding, leading to crushing foreign debt. European powers used this debt as leverage, increasingly interfering in Ottoman affairs. Nationalist movements among the empire's diverse populations intensified. Greeks had already won independence in the 1820s. Throughout the 19th century, Serbs, Bulgarians, Romanians, and others pushed for autonomy or independence. The empire earned a new nickname, The sick man of Europe. European powers debated what would happen when the Ottoman Empire finally collapsed, each maneuvering to ensure they would benefit. The Eastern Question, as this was called, dominated European diplomacy. In 1876, Abdul Hamid II became Sultan. His reign, lasting until 1909, was controversial. He initially supported constitutional reform, promulgating the first Ottoman constitution in 1876. However, he suspended the constitution and parliament in 1878, ruling as an autocrat for 3 decades. Abdul Hamid was intelligent and cunning. He played European powers against each other, modernized communications and education, and promoted pan-Islamic ideology to counteract nationalist movements. Yet his authoritarian rule and use of secret police created widespread resentment. Opposition coalesced around the Young Turk movement, military officers, and intellectuals who demanded constitutional government. In 1908, the Young Turk Revolution forced Abdul Hamid to restore the constitution. The following year, he was deposed. The Young Turks, particularly the Committee of Union and Progress, effectively controlled the government. The empire's final years were marked by almost constant crisis. In 1911, Italy invaded Libya. In 1912 and 1913, the Balkan Wars saw a coalition of Balkan states drive the Ottomans out of virtually all their remaining European territories except a small area around Istanbul. The empire lost millions of people and vast territories in just a few years. Then came World War I, the final catastrophe. The Ottoman Empire entered the war in October 1914 on the side of Germany and Austria-Hungary. The reasons were complex: German influence, fear of Russia, hope of recovering lost territories, and the ambitions of the Young Turk leadership, particularly Enver Pasha. Initially, the Ottomans achieved some successes, most notably repelling the Allied invasion at Gallipoli in 1915 and 1916. This campaign made a national hero of Mustafa Kemal, later known as Ataturk. However, the war went badly on other fronts. British forces advanced through Mesopotamia and Palestine. Russian armies pushed into eastern Anatolia. The Armenian population, suspected of disloyalty, was subjected to mass deportation and massacre, events that remain deeply controversial and painful to this day. By 1918, the Ottoman war effort had collapsed. The Armistice of Mudros in October 1918 effectively ended Ottoman participation in the war. Allied force occupied Istanbul. The Treaty of Sèvres in 1920 imposed harsh terms, partitioning Anatolia among victorious powers and local forces. The Ottoman state seemed finished, but the Turkish people, led by Mustafa Kemal, refused to accept this fate. The Turkish War of Independence, fought from 1919 to 1922, drove out occupying forces and established a new Turkish state. On November 1st, 1922, the Ottoman Sultanate was formally abolished. The last Sultan, Mehmed VI, fled on a British warship. On October 29, 1923, the Republic of Turkey was proclaimed with Mustafa Kemal Ataturk as its first president. The Ottoman Empire, which had endured for 623 years, was no more. The Caliphate, the spiritual leadership of Sunni Islam, was abolished in 1924. A new, secular, nationalist Turkish state rose from the empire's ashes. The Ottoman legacy is complex and continues to shape our world. For its subjects, the empire was a diverse experience. For some, it offered opportunity and protection. For others, particularly in its declining years, it meant oppression and exploitation. The empire's religious tolerance, particularly in its earlier centuries, was remarkable for its time, allowing Christians, Jews and Muslims to coexist under the millet system, which granted religious communities significant autonomy. Ottoman contributions to art, architecture, and culture are undeniable. From the magnificent mosques of Mimar Sinan to Ottoman miniature painting, from classical Ottoman music to literature, the empire created a distinctive and influential civilization. Ottoman administrative practices influenced later states. The empire served as a bridge between civilizations, facilitating trade and cultural exchange between East and West. Yet the Ottoman legacy is also one of conflict and contested memory. For many in southeastern Europe and the Middle East, Ottoman rule is remembered as foreign occupation. Nationalist narratives in successor states often portray the Ottoman period negatively. In Turkey, attitudes toward the Ottoman past have varied, from rejection during the early Republican period to a more positive reassessment in recent decades. The Ottoman Empire's dissolution created the modern Middle East, with borders drawn by European powers that often ignored local realities. Many contemporary conflicts in the region have roots in the Ottoman Empire's collapse and the arrangements that followed. The empire's multi-ethnic, multi-religious character contrasts sharply with the nationalist states that succeeded it, raising questions about identity and belonging that remain relevant today. The story of the Ottoman Empire reminds us of fundamental truths about power and civilization. Empires rise through military strength, effective administration, and the ability to integrate diverse peoples. They reach greatness through cultural achievement, economic prosperity, and visionary leadership. But they also decline when they fail to adapt, when corruption takes root, when they lose the dynamism that created them in the first place. The Ottoman experience also demonstrates the importance of institutional flexibility. The empire endured for 6 centuries partly because it could adapt to changing circumstances, incorporating new peoples, technologies, and ideas. Yet ultimately, it could not adapt fast enough to the revolutionary changes of the modern era. Nationalism, industrialization, and the global power shift toward Western Europe and later the United States. Today, the physical remnants of the Ottoman Empire remain visible across 3 continents. Magnificent mosques, fortresses, bridges, and caravanserais to the landscape from Budapest to Baghdad, from Algiers to the Arabian Peninsula. These structures remind us of the empire's grandeur and its lasting impact on the regions it once ruled. The Ottoman Empire's story is ultimately a human story of ambition and achievement, of creativity and conquest, of adaptation and eventual decline. It is a reminder that no empire, however powerful, lasts forever, but that the marks civilizations leave on human culture and history can endure long after their political structures have crumbled into dust. The Ottoman Empire shaped the world we inhabit today, and understanding its history helps us understand the complex dynamics of power, culture, and change that continue to shape our global civilization.